And contrasting with that, Bill Viola, 2005, this is Firewoman. And again, interested in the technologies, many of you will know he uses ultra-slow motion to bring speed down to almost a complete stillness. And this is one of the strands that has been quite common in video making, where you almost take the moving image right down to being virtually a still image, and it's sort of exploring the contrast between the two. But Bill has been particularly interested in the history of art, aspects such as philosophy and spirituality, extraordinarily beautiful images. I'm sure you know the work. Even larger scale projections, Pipilotti Wrist, these have become virtually completely immersive. And one of the things here is an almost new form of spectatorship here, because this is in the Museum of Modern Art New York main new atrium space, and some of you may have been to this, but she projects on all four walls completely seamlessly. You can't figure how she projects behind the pillars and so on. And in the middle is this huge sort of lounge, relaxing area where people could just chill out and watch the imagery. And it really became not immersive in that there'd been a technological interest in immersion for a long period, but in imagery that completely envelops your senses. And again, the technologies really have only been recently available to do this extraordinary sort of work of very high resolution, but completely seamless joining of where the images come together. Again, a contrast. Toshio Iwai, a Japanese artist, he has been working for probably 20 or 30 years. A very different tradition, I'd say, interactive media art, and particularly taking inspirations from digital music, gameplay, instrument design and performance. So he's done a whole series of works over a long period where one of his interests has been looking back into the history of the moving image and looking at things like Pepper's Ghosts and early forms of animation and using those and bringing them up to date in the contemporary era. This is a piece, I think, from about 2007, where this is a moving image interface which enables you to create music as well. And I think he's actually selling this commercially. It's quite interesting because Toshio was one of the real pioneers of what you might call electronic arts, that interest in the technology itself and using it for artistic purpose. But he moved over into the games industry, and he has quite seamlessly moved between out-and-out industry practice and art practice. And again, it's one of these trends I do want to pick up. This borrowing across the forms is very important. And then, of course, we go right into the virtual realm. So this is Edo Stern, who is a pioneer of developing computer games as a creative art form. This is Waco Resurrection from 2004, using the immersive possibilities of the web to create gameplay that has an artistic or social interest underpinning it, exploring the nature of that particular, those of you who remember it, the Waco siege, exploring through virtual reality and allowing you to explore for yourself the artwork rather than being given a predetermined piece of art. This has been quite a strong trend in recent years, and I can again only pick out two or three. This is Chao Fei, exploring the possibilities of Second Life, which is the online environments where you can live in a complete online world. She has built RMB City in 2008, and this is on a Creative Commons principle, so anybody can go in there and use it, and you can virtually live in the world if you want online. And share that experience. And this is a developing form that keeps moving. Often these online things are not one singular piece of art. They're worlds that simply keep moving. And they start presenting quite interesting issues. Another form here, Eva and Franco Mattis, very much interested in the whole net-based art movement, quite provocative art. This is based on performance art in Second Life again. It's a reenactment of Gilbert and George's The Singing Sculpture. I think this is from about 2007. And what this starts presenting is some interesting questions, because once it's online and it's ephemeral, you start having to ask, if I'm part of creation of the art form, what is the relationship between the artist and what is the relationship with the audience when the audience are part of creating the art? It also presents the interesting question of some of this work is completely ephemeral. Once it's been done, that's it and it goes. So how do you make that work become visible again? How do you archive it? How do you preserve it for the future? These present really interesting new issues for us who are trying to look at these and preserve them for the future. Let me just look at, moving away from the online world, a series of artists from around the world again who have explored different aspects of the moving image. This is William Kentridge. Many will know, extraordinarily beautiful work, very politically based, commenting on his background in South Africa, but also looking at other forms, Soviet Union and other cultures, looking at issues of repression, political issues and so on, but often in a quite extraordinarily beautiful context of animation. And he also uses animation to explore the creative process itself. Often looking back again to some of the very early technologies. This is anamorphic display, where you only see the full image by looking in the piece in the middle. And that, looking back to early forms of the moving image, is often quite characteristic of this field. Shirin Neshat, this is Women Without Men, 2009, an Iranian photographer and filmmaker, really looking at, again, very strong aspects of cultural diversity here, female perspectives really in a post-colonial world, and very strongly addressing the social, political and psychological dimensions of women's experience in contemporary Islamic societies. Again, no attempt to tell a story, this very clearly in the regime of exploring ideas through artistic practice. Nearer to home, Yang Fudong, contemporary Chinese perspectives articulating multiple perspectives through films and photographs and other media. And these again explore and investigate the structure and formation of identity through myth, personal memory and lived experience. And again, very interesting because these are often shown almost as films, but in the gallery context. And that the boundary between what is film and what could be seen in the traditional cinema auditorium and what is best seen in the gallery context is often quite challenged, I think, in these types of work. Another filmmaker who works in artistic practice, and he's got the most difficult to name to pronounce, I know, Pichapong Wiresithakul. You will know recently won major filmmaking awards. And again, a bit like Yang Fudong, exploring issues facing contemporary Thai society, again exploring myth, dream, and traditional and demotic stories. Again, very, very beautiful and poetic work. Now, I can't complete this survey of a range of international makers without briefly looking at Australia. Australia has embraced quite strongly the whole, particularly I think the perspective from the electronic arts perspective, where people were exploring in the 1990s computer programs that could generate artworks based on things like artificial life programs and sort of forms of artificial life that could be generated automatically as moving images from computer programs. That's been a strong tradition in Australia. But more recently, I think it's moved into a bit more the sort of work I've already been showing you. So this is Sean Gladwell, who's a Venice Biennale artist. Again, a bit like Bill Viola, uses slow motion to extraordinarily beautiful effect. He almost slows down these bodies into the landscape and becomes virtually still imagery. Very interested in two aspects, really. One is Australian urban culture, and in this work, Madis Maximus, also in the unique landscape of Australia, which has been in filmmaking tradition one of the huge distinctive things about the Australian tradition. And Sean is not interested so much in telling stories as exploring the nature of the body and the nature of motion as a sculptural form in the landscape, which is where, when you see he's done works like, some of you will know his skateboarding sequences, of skateboarders just pirouetting in front of a stormy sea. And it's almost become like a sculpture, but with this very gentle notion of movement built into it. Indigenous or Aboriginal art is, again, one of the very strong traditions in past 20 or 30 years in filmmaking, but also in art practice. And probably Tracy Moffat is the best known Indigenous practitioner. She really doesn't see herself as particularly exploring Aboriginal issues. She sees herself as an artist and a filmmaker. But there's no question some of the work like Night Cries and Bewitched from the early 2000s were very much about revisiting and challenging the stereotypes and assumptions around Indigenous art and culture, which remains a very, very strong political and social issue within Australia. Somebody else, Daniel Crooks. Now this is called Time Slice, and you may know this sort of work. If not, you really do have to see it in practice. What he's doing here is almost abstracting out from a piece of film a sort of exploration of almost static imagery, but with this very slow movement throughout it. I can't describe for you exactly how, but basically he takes the film and chops it up and represents it. So the body form moves very, very slowly and almost becomes one huge sculpture. So he's taking time and collapsing it into almost one single image. You'll see this is obviously somebody making motion across, but it's all been generated into one position. And again, he's both interested, his more recent working is becoming quite painterly. So he's interested in expression of form, but he's also looking at the nature of the moving image and how you can break it down into its component parts. Daniel, by the way, was a motion graphics designer at Acme, and one of the things we've tried to do very strongly is employ practicing artists in the right areas of our operations, because it helps us get some of the moving images we create with an artistic intent, and it also, we hope, helps those artists develop their own artistic practice through employment at Acme. Another Australian artist, Lynette Walworth, very innovative Australian practitioner. She's got this sort of very magical and mystical installations and videos. What you'll see here is images that are, I think, computer generated, projected down in a darkened space, and you actually see them by holding these bowls, and you have to hold them over the right spots, and they become almost like semi-mystical experiences. They're very, very beautiful. And she's done a series of this. This is called Hold Vessel from 2001. More in the electronic arts tradition, Geoffrey Shaw, some of you will know, and has been over worked a lot in Asia. He has a long tradition of working with exploring new technologies and creating art pieces out the other end. But then he's been very interested in also the nature of immersive experience. And this is a thing called T-Visionarium that's developed in Sydney, and it's been developed over a 5, 6, 7 year period from about 2003. And what you're seeing here is a huge, completely circular screen with about 9 projectors creating a completely seamless image around you. And then he projects the computer imagery into it. The latest has 3D mice that you can actually control the imagery. So you can go up, stand in the middle, and you can bring images towards you wearing 3D spectacles. So you can start, it's a way of interrogating large databases through the 3D experience. This sort of stuff is very, very complex to do. Not only is the technology expensive, but creating something where the 9 projectors are in completely seamless around that dome, it's almost impractical to show this in a public context, because again, putting on the specs, controlling it with the controller, they get damaged very easily. So I have to say, so far, these sort of very large immersive experiences have tended to be fairly experimentally based, or in the end controlled by a curator or somebody else, so you become more of a spectator. And I think it's one of the problems of some of the technological experiences. They're fine in the laboratory, but they don't necessarily translate so well out into the gallery context.